Hi, welcome back. I'm Birdie, otherwise known as Show Me Your Mask. I have a little hobby of just ruining oil executives' day. And a few weeks ago, there was a Senate hearing on climate denial and the big oil companies that are very involved with that. So, my main takeaways from that was we were right about a lot of it. So, I watched the whole 3.5 hour Senate hearing. It was titled Denial, Disinformation, and Doublespeak: Big Oil's Evolving Efforts to Avoid Accountability for Climate Change. And oh boy, was there a lot. Right before this hearing, 4,500 documents were released. It was from the batch of documents that were subpoenaed in 2021 from Big Oil. Some of the documents were released back then. We just got more. So, this is the newsletter Heated. Highly recommend them. Internal materials from Exxon, Chevron, Shell, BP, and the American Petroleum Institute, and the Chamber of Commerce. We've talked about them before. They're being released today. This was a few weeks ago, as a part of the Senate Budget Committee's upcoming hearing. Both the hearing and the documents mark the revival of the House Oversight Committee's 2-year investigation into the fossil fuel industry. I talked about that years ago here on my channel. Wow, time flies. And its role in misleading Americans about climate change. That investigation was put on ice when Republicans won back control of the chamber in late 2022. I remember that. It was depressing. Democrats say their new findings provide a rare glimpse into the extensive efforts undertaken by the fossil companies to deceive the public and investors about their knowledge of the effects of their products on climate change, and to undermine efforts to curb greenhouse gas emissions. So, receipts, they are available. It's not all of the receipts, but there are many to work with. Some things that Heated picked up on was, number one, BP really loves Princeton. To influence academia, fossil fuel companies spent at least $700 million on partnerships with the U.S. universities. The longest running of these partnerships is between BP and Princeton. The new documents provide some insight into why, because Princeton gives BP unprecedented access to discuss about research. They said personality and structural issues at Harvard and Tufts made it difficult to achieve the same BP focus. Achieving BP focus meant two things: pushing research about the benefits of carbon capture and methane gas, and that's what Princeton's Carbon Mitigation Initiative did. The next thing was that oil companies know that they can't meet their public climate goals. They know. They know. We knew that they knew, but now we have the receipts that they knew. So this is the report right here. I will link it in the description of this video for all the folks who like to read, like me. I will also make sure to link the video to the committee hearing if you would also like to watch it in full. I was mildly entertained by the fossil fuel talking points that were thrown around in the meeting. I found it informative to see that they are still trying to use old strategies and they are not working. No. I did look up the various senators who were speaking in Open Secrets. Just to take a little look. I looked at everyone. No one needs to feel singled out. But I did see a trend as far as who was pushing fossil fuel talking points and who was taking hundreds of thousands of dollars in oil and fossil fuel donations every year. John Kennedy, who in 2024 took $544,968 from the fossil fuel industry, and in 2022, $524,157, and then in 2020, $663,113. Gone down a little bit. Wonder what's going on there. Ron Johnson. Yeah. You took $356,317 in 2024, and in 2020, $455,781. It does look like by these numbers, the fossil fuel industry has favorites. I wonder what that feels like. Anyways, moving on to the witnesses. Geoffrey Supran was one of the speakers. I was really impressed by him.
big oil has used third-party allies to do its dirty work, leveraging a global network of over 160 organizations and 5,000 individuals. Exxon alone gave $39 million to 73 climate-denying politicians between 1992 and 2017. For example, Exxon, together with BP, Chevron, Shell, and API, were all members of the Global Climate Coalition, which spent $13 million campaigning against the 1997 Kyoto Protocol, and was so successful that President Bush, quote, rejected Kyoto in part based on input from you. As part of its campaign, the coalition accused individual climate scientists of corruption and malpractice. This hostile approach to critics is echoed by my own experiences, as well as by the new House documents, which reveal Shell, Exxon, BP, and API all tracking activist activities, and an Exxon manager demanding that a Reuters reporter, quote, kill the story. Finally, the fossil fuel industry has funded climate-denying politicians. For instance, former Senator Jim Inhofe described global warming as the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on the American people. Inhofe took almost $2 million in campaign contributions from oil and gas companies, including in 2015, when he tried to refute record temperatures by producing a snowball on the Senate floor. This is not a coincidence. It has been statistically proven that the more Congresspeople vote against the environment, the more money they get from oil companies. On top of campaign contribution donations, between 2000 and 2016, fossil fuel interests also spent $2 billion lobbying Congress, including against climate legislation. They've outspent environmental groups by 10 to 1. This brings us to step 4. Oil companies delay climate action with propaganda. In the mid-2000s, the fossil fuel industry began to shift its strategy from outright denial of science to more subtle, insidious forms of propaganda. They went from denial to delay, and yet their end goal remains the same, and that's to stop action on climate change. As an Exxon manager explained, there was, quote, an effort to carefully reset the corporation's profile on climate positions so it would be more sustainable and less exposed. From 1986 to 2015, BP, Chevron, Exxon, Shell, and ConocoPhillips together spent $3.6 billion on advertising. Today, the oil industry's climate messaging is dominated by what we call discourses of delay, 2 of which I'll discuss now. The first is greenwashing. Just as the fossil fuel industry misled this public about climate science, it is now misleading us about its commitment to be part of the solution. The new documents are full of cases of oil companies strategizing how to publicly present themselves as, quote, greening, even though the oil and gas industry spent just 2.5% of its budget on clean energy in 2022. Take BP, which in the mid-2000s spent $100 million per year rebranding itself as Beyond Petroleum, only to U-turn on that commitment. We now see that in 2021, even BP's own PR consultants were warning that its rhetoric is greener than its actions. This is greenwashing 101. Talk green, act dirty. The new documents likewise show an Exxon vice president privately acknowledging that they were, quote, getting too far out there on their original algae ads, spending a full quarter of their algae biofuel budget on ads, trumpeting a technology that by their own internal admission is, quote, still decades away from the scale we need. The other discourse of delay I want to highlight is fossil fuel solutionism, whereby the oil industry relies on unproven or uneconomical technologies like CCS and offset schemes to argue fossil fuels are central to addressing climate change, despite no company having a business plan consistent with the Paris Agreement. A clear example from the joint investigation is a 2017 BP email that prioritizes, quote, promoting and protecting the role of gas, even though in another BP document, the company admits that, quote, gas doesn't support climate goals when you take methane emissions into account. BP's solution, a $1.1 million per year campaign that included funding white papers from Princeton and Imperial College, quote, highlighting the role of gas as a friend to renewables. This has all the hallmarks of what we call the fossil fuel industry's invisible colonization of academia. In conclusion, there is overwhelming evidence that fossil fuel interests have deliberately used disinformation, lobbying, propaganda, and academic influence to stop action on climate change for decades. As the IPCC has concluded, they have been successful. The memos uncovered by this committee give us new evidence of this long history, exposing even more skeletons in big oil's closet. They confirm our worst fear, which is that fossil fuel companies have failed to change their stripes since Paris, and that their efforts to delay climate action continue. Thank you very much.
The other person that we heard from was Sharon Eubanks. She was on the tobacco litigation team.
I'm Sharon Eubanks, and I was in charge of the racketeering case that the government filed there in 1999. Following a 9-month trial in that case, U.S. District Judge Gladys Kessler ruled in favor of the Justice Department, finding that the tobacco industry defendants were liable for racketeering violations spanning the period of 50 years. Judge Kessler wrote detailed factual findings in the tobacco case, and they reveal a striking similarity to the behavior of the petroleum industry today. For example, Judge Kessler found that the tobacco companies engaged in a massive public relations campaign to fraudulently deny and distort the health consequences of smoking and secondhand smoke. Both industries funneled money into promoting fake science. Exxon knew the reality of climate change back in the 70s and some before that as well. And they later invested in telling the public that climate change was not real. Similarly, Judge Kessler found that the tobacco defendants actively concealed adverse scientific findings, entered into agreements not to conduct research, and used lawyers to control research so that it would serve the purposes of litigation and public relations. That was the research they wanted done. The fossil fuel industry concealed its well-known facts about the cause of climate change and instead deployed significant resources in an effort to sow doubt about the science. Both industries fought hard against regulation. The petroleum industry is quite aware of the possibility that regulations might move us toward low-carbon transportation, directly affecting the bottom line. Both industries lied to the public and regulators about what they knew about the harms of their products and when they knew it. The deceptive advertising and the PR of the fossil fuel industry is now under intense legal scrutiny. More than 1,800 lawsuits have been filed regarding climate liability worldwide. Many of these cases concern the misleading fake science that the industry purposefully distributed to the public for decades. Denying that its product was the leading cause of global climate change, Exxon, in fact, knew that the reality of climate change in the late 1970s and had later invested substantially in telling the public that climate change was not real. The similarities between the conduct of the tobacco industry and the petroleum industry form a solid and appropriate basis for investigating the petroleum industry. Furthermore, we should not waste time and wringing our hands. We have documents that lay out what is currently happening. There exists solid evidentiary basis to support more information being gathered on these companies. Petroleum companies' internal documents tell the story. In 1998, a memo entitled Global Climate Science Communications Action Plan, nicknamed the Victory Memo, outlines a multi-year, multi-million-dollar scheme to create uncertainty about well-established climate science. The idea is to recruit and train a team of scientists to debunk global warming on radio talk shows, press briefings, campus workshops, and other types of public research. While the petroleum industry writ large is deeply involved in the deception, ExxonMobil's manufacturing campaign was not conducted alone. Rather, it associated with other groups and organizations to carry out the message of doubt.
The next person we heard from was Ariel Cohen, described as a political scientist specializing in political risk and energy security, heavily insinuated that investment in renewables is a bad investment. Although he does not feel the same way about liquid natural gas and directly complained about the LNG permit pause. Oops. So Bernie Sanders was at the hearing, and he had a series of questions for the witnesses. If we have an industry that knowingly caused harm, climate and health, he asked Sharon Eubanks, the lawyer, what are the legal grounds for holding them accountable? And her response was that it depends on whether it's federal or state. Sidebar, there are a lot of state-level lawsuits that are happening right now to hold big oil accountable. But Sharon Eubanks, she says RICO conspiracy. Absolutely. Now, here's where things got weird.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Cohen, let me start with you. I think I'm going to ask a few questions. I think these are yes or no or I don't know questions. The last 3 years, unfortunately, the United States economy experienced substantial inflation. Is that correct? And
Yes, sir.
that inflation is man-made, is it not?
Any inflation is man-made, sir.
And that man's name is Joe Biden, is it not?
Cannot answer that, sir.
Okay. Since President Biden took office, average electricity in the United States are up 29.4%, are they not?
I'll have to check the data and get back to you on that, sir.
And isn't it true that electricity prices have increased under President Biden, have increased 13 times faster than the previous 7 years?
I'll have to check the data, sir.
Okay. And the National Energy Assistant Directors Association, I don't know if you're familiar with them. I've checked them out. They're a reputable group. They say that the average United States electricity bill will go up 10% this year and 10% next year. Is that correct?
Again, I'm not familiar with the data, but I can point out, sir, that in Europe,
I'm not interested in
in
Europe. I'm
Europe,
interested in
prices are 2.5% to 3%
our
higher.
people. I'm interested in our people right now who are having to,
Our people have,
who are having to sell blood in order to pay their electricity bill.
goodness.
A substantial portion of this inflation in electricity, up 30% since President Biden took office, is related to his energy policies. Is it not?
Energy prices fluctuate based on supply and demand of all sources of energy, yes.
I think it has nothing, is that a yes or no?
It's a very complicated economic
I
question.
understand. Give me an answer. Did President Biden's policies contribute to the inflation or didn't they?
Both Republican and Democratic administrations infuse the economy with trillions of dollars, which contributes to the inflation, yes.
I don't believe any Republicans voted for the Inflation Reduction Act. Is that correct?
I don't know.
Well, I do. $1.2 trillion, Green New Deal. No Republicans voted for it. You want to amend your answer?
I'll amend my answer that under President Trump and under President Biden, trillions of dollars were infused into the economy
Under Trump,
and
electricity prices
contributed
went
to
up 5%
inflation.
over 4 years, and under Biden, they went up 30% over 3 years. Which is better?
Again, under Trump, please.
Under Trump, electricity prices went up 5%. Under Biden, they went up 30% over 3 years. Which is better?
Clearly, lower rise in electricity prices better.
All right.
However,
Senator Kennedy, sir, the next part, I don't really have words for what happened next, so we're just going to roll the clip.
Dr. Supran, on December 14, 2023, you tweeted in support of Climate Defiance. That's an entity that the Brookings Institute is called a radical climate change group. Is that correct?
I don't recall, I'm afraid.
Okay, would this be the same climate defiance that I'm looking at your tweet, you tweeted in support of them. Would this be the same climate defiance that called Senator Joe Biden, quote, a sick fuck?
I don't know, but as I
Would this
mentioned
be
in my-
the same climate defiance that called Senator Lisa Murkowski a murderer?
I do not know. As I said in my statement...
Would this be the same climate defiance who told the CEO of Exxon to, quote, eat shit, Darren, close quote?
I'm not responsible for the statements of other
Nice
people.
group you're
and I also
hanging
do not know
around
the
with,
answer.
Doc. Here's what your tweet says. Quote, we do, in support of climate defiance, we do not do online petitions. We do not do NGO coalition letters. We do not do fucking bus stop ads. We chase fossil fuel CEOs and the politicians who do their bidding, and we do not apologize, close quote. Did I read that correctly?
That is not my tweet, sir.
That is your tweet. I'm looking
believe
at it.
this is it.
Here's a copy right here. It's right off your website, Biggest Dallas. On
I'm almost
October
certain that that is not
31,
my tweet, sir.
2023, you said this on Twitter. Quote, climate justice was coined by our movements to locate it as a struggle against genocidal racial injustice, colonialism, and apartheid. If your climate justice doesn't stand with the Palestinians against colonialism and apartheid, then your climate justice has no justice in it, close quote. Did you say that?
I believe not.
Here it is,
May
bigger
I,
than
may, I,
Dallas.
may I please see the documents?
Yes, sir, and the witnesses' documents there.
May I please
And the
point out that
senators,
this form
the
of
senator's time has expired and there are other senators waiting.
I've got a bunch more tweets. Thank you for your objective advice,
I'm sure you
Doc.
do. You can put them into a question for the record and.
Yes,
they'll
I'd
have
like to submit all of the good doctors' objective tweets and scientific analysis for the record.
That
Thank
will
you.
be done without objection. Senator Merkley,
May I clarify one final point?
proceed.
These are not my tweets. These are retweets. It's an
Oh,
important
you
contradiction.
often retweet stuff you don't support? Is that what you're telling me, Doc?
I did not say that I don't support this. I simply did not tweet it, which, as you were alleging.
retweeted
I'd
them,
like
didn't
to
you?
make very clear that this
But
form
you
of character
retweeted them,
assassination
didn't
is
you?
characteristic of the propaganda techniques of fossil fuel
You
injection.
retweeted
Senator
it,
Merkley.
didn't you?
Thank you.
Are you going to call me a sick fuck?
It's Senator Merkley's time.
Senator Merkley went a little bit deeper into the nature of the influence that big oil has on our politics.
Plan is the second document that I just entered into the record, and I think it's a roadmap for often how the oil industry goes about trying to create a media campaign, many features of a media campaign, in order to change how people think about an issue. And this proceeds to say that the challenges we face, quote, will only get worse unless we change public's perception of us. And end of quote. It goes on to talk about many pieces of that strategy, spending $300,000 a year on soft persuasion, spending $2.5 million per year, or as much as $4.5 million per year on what it calls hard persuasion. That includes a lot of advertising campaigns, again, media campaigns. It includes an employee contractor education and advocacy program. It includes creating British Petroleum social media identities. I'm not sure exactly what all that means. I don't know if it's people to weigh in on social media. It talks then about additional funding for lobbyists. And so I wanted to ask you, Dr. Supran, is this pretty characteristic of how petroleum industry, the fossil fuel industry, seeks to really change public perceptions and to influence politicians right down to the local county level to achieve their objectives of expanding fossil fuel refineries, expanding consumption?
Yes, and it constitutes important additional evidence to that effect.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So that was a wild hearing, and it took me a few weeks to make a video about it. Sorry for the wait. Leave me a comment, like the video, subscribe, check out the newsletter, and all of that. All right, look out for the next video, and I will see you next time. Bye.